Dear friend, you're sitting there now, maybe with a cup of tea in your hand, or gazing out the window at the world moving by. Life has brought you here, to this quiet moment where you can finally pause and reflect. And if I know anything about people our age, it's that we've all got stories tucked away in the corners of our hearts, some too heavy to carry anymore. Today, I want to talk to you about one burden I carried for far too long. The apologies I never gave. I wish I could tell you these words when I was younger, but back then, pride often spoke louder than wisdom. It wasn't until my later years, when time had softened me and stripped away the need to always be right, that I began to see how much harm those unspoken I'm sorries had done. Not just to others, but to myself. I realized something important. Saying sorry isn't just an act of kindness towards someone else. It's also a gift we give ourselves. It clears the air, mends old wounds, and lets us step into the rest of our days lighter, freer. In this letter, I want to share 4 people I should have apologized to, and why doing so would have changed not only their lives, but mine as well. My hope is that hearing my story might help you think about your own. Maybe there's someone waiting on the other side of forgiveness. A person from your past who still holds space for you, even after all these years. Or maybe it's simply time to let go of the guilt yourself. Either way, I believe this conversation matters deeply, especially now, when every day feels like borrowed time. Let me start with the first name that comes to mind. My father. He passed away when I was 52, and though he lived a good life, I'll never forget the look in his eyes during our last real conversation. We weren't close, not really. Growing up, he was strict, distant, the kind of man who thought discipline built character. As a boy, I resented him for it. By the time I became a man, I'd convinced myself I didn't need his approval anyway. But oh, how wrong I was. The truth is, I owed him an apology long before he left this earth. There were things I said, or worse, things I didn't say that cut deeper than any belt ever could. Like the time I stormed out of the house at 16 because he grounded me for coming home late. I slammed the door behind me shouting, over my shoulder, that I hated him. Those words stayed with him, I think. They lingered in the silence between us, growing heavier with each passing year. When he died, I found myself standing beside his casket, whispering those 2 little words under my breath. I'm sorry. But they came too late for him to hear them. Too late for me to see the relief in his eyes. What I've learned since then is this. Apologizing doesn't erase the past, but it does rewrite its ending. Had I swallowed my pride and told him how sorry I was while he was still alive, perhaps we could have rebuilt what was broken. Perhaps I wouldn't feel that ache in my chest whenever I think of him now. So, friend, if there's a parent in your life you haven't made peace with yet, don't wait. Even if it feels awkward, even if you fear rejection, reach out. You'll regret it less than you will staying silent. Now, let me turn to someone else. A childhood friend named Clara. She was my partner in crime growing up, the kind of girl who could make anyone laugh until their sides hurt. We drifted apart, as adults caught up in our own lives. But there was one incident that severed our bond completely. It happened at her wedding of all places. In a fit of jealousy, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time, I made a cruel joke about her new husband during the reception. Everyone laughed, but Clara didn't. Her face went pale, and she excused herself quickly. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she'd get over it, but she never did. Our friendship fizzled out soon after, and no matter how many times I picked up the phone to call her, I couldn't bring myself to dial. Years later, I ran into Clara at a grocery store. She looked older, of course, but her smile was still the same. We exchanged pleasantries, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. I wanted to apologize, to explain that I hadn't meant to hurt her, that I was young and foolish and insecure. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I waved goodbye and watched her walk away, knowing I'd missed another chance to set things right. What stays with me most is the realization that friendships are fragile, precious things. They require care and honesty to thrive. And sheer apology may not fix everything, but it opens the door to healing. If not for the relationship itself, then at least for your own conscience. If you have a friend you've wronged, whether recently or decades ago, consider reaching out. A simple "I'm sorry" might not mend the rift entirely, but it could plant the seed for reconciliation, or at least give you both closure. And that brings us to something else I think you'll find helpful. There's another person I owe an apology to, someone whose absence has shaped so much of my life. Join me next time as I continue this letter, sharing more of what I've come to understand about the power of forgiveness, and why it's never too late to say the words we've kept locked away for so long. Dear friend, when we last spoke, I shared the weight of 2 apologies I carried for far too long. One's meant for my father and a childhood friend named Clara. As I sit here now, penning this next part of my letter to you, I find myself thinking about how life moves in circles. The people we hurt, the words we leave unsaid, they don't just disappear, they linger, like echoes bouncing off the walls of our memories, reminding us of what could have been. Today, I want to talk about someone else I should have apologized to, a person whose absence has left a void I still feel deeply. This is the story of Eleanor, my first love. She came into my life like a summer storm, sudden, exhilarating, impossible to ignore. We were young, reckless, and convinced that love would conquer everything. But, as it often does, reality crept in, wearing down the edges of our idealism until there was nothing left but frustration and disappointment. Looking back, I realize now that Eleanor didn't deserve the way I treated her near the end of our relationship. I was selfish, consumed by ambition and the need to prove myself to the world. When she needed me most, when she was struggling with her own dreams and doubts, I wasn't there. Instead of listening, I dismissed her feelings. Instead of supporting her, I criticized her choices. And when things finally fell apart, I let pride take over. Rather than apologizing for my failures, I blamed her for ours. The breakup was messy, filled with harsh words neither of us truly meant. Afterward, I told myself it was better this way, that we weren't right for each other anyway. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had failed her. I had failed us. And though decades have passed since then, I've never stopped wondering what might have happened if I'd simply said, "I'm sorry." Would it have changed the outcome? Probably not, but it might have softened the blow, allowed us both to walk away with dignity rather than resentment. What strikes me most now is how much easier it is to see these moments clearly from a distance. Back then, I was so caught up in proving I was right that I couldn't see how wrong I was being. It's funny, isn't it? Life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it. These days, whenever I think of Eleanor, I wonder where she is, what kind of life she's built for herself. Is she happy? Has she forgiven me, even if I haven't asked for it? Or does she carry the same ache I do, the one that whispers, what if there's someone in your past who fits this description, a former partner, a spouse, or even a close companion, you know exactly what I mean. Love leaves marks on us, some beautiful, others painful. And while it's true that not every relationship can or should be salvaged, an apology can still serve as a bridge across the chasm of lost time. It doesn't have to reopen old wounds. Sometimes it simply acknowledges them, allowing both parties to heal. Now, let me turn to another name that haunts me. Someone I haven't thought about in years, yet whose memory suddenly feels vivid and raw. His name was Harold, and he was my mentor early in my career. At the time, I didn't fully appreciate the role he played in shaping the person I became. He believed in me when I doubted myself, pushed me harder than anyone else ever had, and taught me lessons I only understood later in life. But despite all he did for me, I repaid him with ingratitude. It happened during a particularly difficult period at work. I was overwhelmed, stretched thin, and frustrated by the lack of recognition I felt I deserved. One day, after a disagreement with Harold, I lashed out at him in front of colleagues. I accused him of favoritism, of holding me back intentionally. My words were cruel, unfounded, and entirely unfair. To his credit, Harold remained calm, refusing to stoop to my level. But the damage was done. Our professional relationship never recovered, and though I stayed in touch sporadically, I never apologized for my behavior. Years later, when I heard that Harold had retired, I sent him a congratulatory note. It was polite, pleasant even, but hollow. I avoided mentioning the incident, pretending it hadn't happened, and then one day I received news that he had passed away unexpectedly. The obituary mentioned his dedication to mentoring young professionals, his generosity, and his unwavering belief in the potential of others. Reading those words, I felt a pang of shame so sharp it nearly took my breath away. Here was a man who had given me so much, and I had repaid him with betrayal. This brings me to something important I've learned through all of this. Mentors matter. They shape us in ways we don't always recognize until much later. An apology to someone like Harold may seem small in the grand scheme of things, but it carries immense weight. It tells them, thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. If there's a mentor in your life you've neglected to thank, or worse, wronged, I urge you to reach out. Whether they're still here or gone, expressing your gratitude and regret, if necessary, can bring a sense of peace that lingers long after the moment passes. Before I finish this letter, there's one more person I need to tell you about, the hardest one of all. This individual holds a special place in my heart, not because of who they are, but because of what they represent. Join me next time as I share the final piece of this puzzle, along with some reflections on why saying sorry matters so much, not just for those we've wronged, but for ourselves. Dear friend, we've come a long way together in this letter, haven't we? From my father and Clara to Eleanor and Harold, I've shared pieces of my heart that I once thought were too heavy to carry, let alone speak aloud. But now, as I sit here writing these final words to you, I find myself facing the hardest apology of all, the one I owe to myself. Yes, you read that right. Of all the people I've wronged over the years, none has suffered more silently or patiently than the person staring back at me in the mirror. It's strange, isn't it? We spend so much of our lives apologizing to others, trying to mend fences and smooth over hurts, yet we rarely stop to consider how often we fail ourselves. For decades, I carried guilt not just for what I'd done to others, but also for the promises I broke to my own soul. Let me explain what I mean. There was a time when I believed that success, real success meant sacrificing everything else. Happiness, health, even peace of mind. I worked tirelessly, chasing promotions and accolades, convinced that someday they would fill the emptiness inside me. But no matter how high I climbed, the hole only seemed to grow deeper. Along the way, I made choices I regretted, choices that hurt not just those around me, but also the person I wanted to be. I remember one particular moment vividly. It was late at night, and I was sitting alone in my office, surrounded by papers and deadlines. My wife had called earlier, asking if I'd make it home for dinner. Of course, I'd promised her. But as the hours ticked by, I told myself she'd understand. After all, wasn't providing for my family more important than sharing a meal with them? That's what I told myself anyway. What I didn't realize then was that every missed dinner, every cancelled plan, every broken promise chipped away at something precious, a sense of connection, belonging, and self-respect. It wasn't until much later, when I found myself retired and searching for meaning in the quiet days ahead, that I began to see the toll those decisions had taken. The man I became, the one who prioritized work over relationships, ambition over joy, wasn't the man I set out to be. And though I couldn't change the past, I realized I owed him an apology, yes, but also forgiveness. I needed to forgive myself for not knowing better, for making mistakes born of fear and insecurity, for failing to honor the dreams I once held dear. This is where I want to pause and speak directly to you, dear friend. Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt the weight of your own unspoken regrets? Maybe there's a dream you abandoned because it felt too risky, a passion you silenced because someone told you it wasn't practical. Or perhaps, like me, you spent years running so fast you forgot why you started in the first place. Whatever the case may be, know this: it's never too late to say sorry to yourself. Apologizing to yourself doesn't mean excusing poor choices or pretending they didn't happen. Rather, it's about acknowledging the pain, learning from it, and giving yourself permission to move forward. It's about saying, I see you, I hear you, and I'm sorry for letting you down. When you do that, something remarkable happens. The weight begins to lift. You start to feel lighter, freer, and more alive. And maybe, just maybe, you rediscover the parts of yourself you thought were lost forever. As I close this letter, I want to leave you with one final thought. Life is fleeting, unpredictable, and achingly beautiful. Each day we're given is a gift, an opportunity to love, to learn, to grow. Don't waste it carrying burdens you don't have to bear. Reach out to the people you've wronged, whether They're still here or exist only in your memories. Speak the words you've kept locked away for far too long, and most importantly, extend the same grace to yourself that you so freely offer to others. If anything I've shared resonates with you, I'd be honored if you took a moment to reflect on your own life. Who are the people you need to apologize to? What promises do you need to make and keep to yourself? These questions aren't easy, but they're worth asking. Because in the end, it's not the years in our lives that matter, it's the life in our years. Before I sign off, I want to thank you for listening, for reflecting, for being part of this journey with me. If this letter spoke to you, I hope you'll share it with someone you care about. A simple act, like, that can ripple outward, touching hearts in ways we may never fully understand. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to The Elder's Letter. It would mean the world to me to continue sharing stories like this with you. Until next time, take care of that beautiful soul of yours. Remember, there's always room for forgiveness, for others and for yourself. With warmth and gratitude, your elder friend,